Sometimes the bravest person in the room is the one nobody bothers to notice. And on one unforgettable evening inside the Romano estate, a single instinctive step would change every life beneath its roof. The annual family reception filled the grand ballroom with elegant conversation, soft classical music, and the warm glow of crystal chandeliers reflecting across polished marble floors. Distinguished guests exchanged greetings while servers moved gracefully between tables carrying silver trays decorated with sparkling glasses and carefully prepared appetizers. Every detail had been planned with precision worthy of Adrian Moretti, whose reputation for discipline extended far beyond business and into every corner of his magnificent New York home. Near the back of the ballroom, Olivia Carter quietly completed her duties. Among the household staff, she had earned an unfortunate nickname. Some called her the Clumsy Maid because she occasionally rushed to help others before thinking about herself. She apologized too often, worried about everyone around her, and somehow always found herself cleaning accidents she had never caused. Even so, she never complained. She simply smiled, adjusted her uniform, and continued serving with quiet determination. Adrian's elderly mother, Eleanor Moretti, greeted relatives near the center of the ballroom. Age had softened neither her dignity nor her kindness, and every employee respected her gentle manner. As conversations continued, an unexpected disagreement quietly grew between Eleanor and a distant relative whose impatient temperament had often unsettled family gatherings. Voices became sharper. Several guests exchanged uneasy glances, yet no one stepped forward. Olivia noticed the tension while carrying a tray of porcelain teacups across the room. She slowed her pace, watching Eleanor maintain remarkable composure despite the uncomfortable exchange. Then everything happened within a heartbeat. The frustrated relative suddenly made a reckless movement toward Eleanor. Without pausing to calculate the consequences, Olivia reacted on pure instinct. She stepped directly between them, raising one arm to shield the elderly woman while the heavy serving tray slipped from her hands. Porcelain shattered across the marble floor. Crystal glasses rolled in every direction. The elegant music stopped almost immediately as dozens of startled faces turned toward the deafening crash. Eleanor remained unharmed, but the breathtaking silence that followed lasted only a moment before confused whispers spread through the ballroom. Guests saw broken dishes. They saw Olivia standing in front of Eleanor. They did not see the frightening moment that had forced her to move. At that exact instant, Adrian entered through the main doorway after finishing an important phone call outside. His eyes immediately fell upon the scattered porcelain, spilled tea, anxious guests, and Olivia standing in the center of the chaos. Before anyone could explain, several embarrassed relatives began speaking at once. Some insisted the maid had lost her balance. Others claimed she had interrupted the evening with careless behavior. The impatient relative quickly remained silent, allowing the misunderstanding to grow without correction. Olivia lowered her eyes and quietly accepted every accusing glance. She never pointed toward the person whose reckless action had placed Eleanor in danger. She never defended herself. Her first concern remained the elderly woman she gently helped toward a nearby chair while asking in a calm voice whether she felt all right. Eleanor looked into Olivia's eyes with quiet gratitude, understanding far more than anyone else inside the room. Adrian noticed the concern on his mother's face, yet the full truth remained hidden beneath the confusion surrounding them. As employees hurried to clear the broken porcelain and guests attempted to restore the evening's elegance, Olivia silently knelt to collect the scattered pieces herself, accepting blame for a moment she had never caused. No applause followed her courage. No one thanked her. Beneath the golden lights of the magnificent ballroom, the woman who had protected another without hesitation appeared to everyone else as nothing more than the clumsy maid who had ruined an important family celebration. By the following morning, the elegant ballroom had returned to its usual perfection. Every fragment of broken porcelain had disappeared, fresh flowers once again decorated the marble hall, and guests who remained at the estate spoke politely over breakfast as though the uncomfortable interruption had never happened. Yet inside the household, the previous evening had quietly become the only subject anyone wished to discuss. Rumors moved through the service corridors much faster than the staff assigned to polish silver or prepare fresh linens. Some insisted Olivia had simply tripped over the edge of an expensive rug. Others claimed she had become nervous while serving distinguished guests. A few even suggested she had embarrassed the Moretti family by allowing panic to overcome her professionalism. The unfortunate nickname that had followed her since the day she first arrived suddenly spread even further throughout the estate. The Clumsy Maid. Olivia heard every whispered remark while carrying folded towels toward the guest suites. She neither argued nor corrected anyone. Whenever another employee offered an awkward apology for repeating the gossip, she answered with the same gentle smile and quietly continued working. Her greatest concern was never her own reputation. She only hoped Mrs. Eleanor Moretti had rested well after the emotional family gathering. Shortly after sunrise, Olivia carried a breakfast tray upstairs herself instead of asking another housekeeper to deliver it. Fresh fruit, warm tea, lightly buttered toast, and homemade oatmeal rested neatly upon the polished silver tray. She knocked softly before entering Eleanor's sitting room. Sunlight poured through tall windows overlooking the gardens, casting gentle golden light across comfortable armchairs and shelves filled with family photographs collected over many decades. Eleanor welcomed her with a warm smile that immediately softened Olivia's worried expression. "Good morning, Mrs. Moretti," Olivia said quietly. "I hope you were able to sleep." Eleanor nodded. "Much better than you, I imagine." Olivia looked down modestly while placing the breakfast tray beside the window. "I only wanted to make sure you were safe." Eleanor studied the young woman for a long moment before answering. Sometimes the kindest people carry burdens that were never theirs to begin with. Olivia offered only a small smile before carefully adjusting the blanket across Eleanor's knees and asking whether she needed anything else. She never mentioned the previous evening. Neither did Eleanor. Some truths required patience before they could be spoken aloud. Downstairs, Adrian spent most of the morning meeting with attorneys and financial advisors preparing for several important business negotiations. Even while reviewing contracts worth millions of dollars, he found himself recalling the image of Olivia kneeling among shattered porcelain while silently cleaning the mess around her. Something about the memory continued to trouble him. It was not the broken dishes that remained in his thoughts. It was the unusual calm in Olivia's face. She had looked far more concerned about his mother than about herself. During lunch, Adrian casually asked Samuel, the longtime estate manager, "Has Olivia always been somewhat accident-prone?" Samuel hesitated before answering carefully. "She has always moved quickly whenever someone needs help, sir. That urgency sometimes places her in difficult situations, but she has never been careless with her responsibilities." Adrian quietly considered those words. They did not match the rumors spreading through the mansion. Later that afternoon, he watched from the library window as Olivia helped an elderly gardener gather fallen branches after a strong wind passed through the property. She laughed softly when one stubborn leaf landed on her shoulder, brushing it away before continuing her work with the same cheerful patience she offered every task. Watching her from a distance, Adrian found it increasingly difficult to believe the careless version of the story everyone seemed eager to accept. Somewhere between the frightened whispers, the broken porcelain, and the quiet dignity Olivia continued to display, he sensed an important piece of the truth was still waiting to be discovered. The uncomfortable whispers gradually faded over the next several days, but they never disappeared completely. Every hallway inside the Romano estate carried quiet echoes of the misunderstanding that had unfolded during the family reception. Some employees still exchanged knowing glances whenever Olivia hurried through the corridors with fresh linens or flower arrangements, convinced they already understood exactly what had happened that evening. Olivia never challenged their assumptions. She greeted everyone with the same gentle smile, completed every assignment with quiet dedication, and treated those who doubted her with the same respect she offered everyone else. If the unfair judgment wounded her heart, she never allowed anyone to see it. Eleanor Moretti, however, remembered every second of that evening with perfect clarity. Age had sharpened her ability to recognize character beneath appearances, and the image of Olivia stepping between herself and an emotional confrontation refused to leave her thoughts. She understood something no one else seemed willing to consider. Courage often arrived without warning, and true courage rarely paused to explain itself afterward. One peaceful afternoon, Eleanor invited Olivia to join her in the estate conservatory while fresh rain softly tapped against the glass ceiling above rows of blooming orchids and white lilies. The room glowed with warm afternoon light, creating an atmosphere of quiet comfort far removed from the elegant formality of the mansion's grand reception rooms. Olivia carefully poured tea before preparing to leave, assuming Eleanor wished to enjoy the afternoon alone. "Please stay for a few minutes," Eleanor said warmly. Olivia hesitated before taking the chair across from her. "You have been working very hard this week." Olivia smiled modestly. "There is always something that needs to be done." Eleanor studied her with gentle kindness. "Do you always carry other people's burdens without saying a word?" Olivia lowered her eyes, unsure how to answer. After a thoughtful silence, she quietly replied, "Sometimes explaining only creates more pain. If everyone was safe, that was enough for me." Eleanor felt her heart grow heavier. The young woman sitting before her had accepted blame she never deserved simply to keep an already painful family. Disagreement from becoming even more public. At that same moment, Adrian happened to pass the conservatory on his way toward the West Library. Through the glass doors, he noticed his mother and Olivia sharing tea together. The sight surprised him. His mother rarely invited household staff to spend quiet afternoons in conversation. Curious, he slowed his pace without interrupting them. He could not hear every word, but he noticed something far more revealing than the conversation itself. Eleanor smiled at Olivia with unmistakable affection and gratitude. Olivia responded with the same humility she showed every day, never appearing proud, resentful, or eager to gain sympathy. Later that evening, Adrian asked Eleanor whether she had enjoyed the afternoon. She answered with unusual seriousness. "Some people reveal their character only when life becomes difficult." Olivia revealed hers in a single heartbeat. Adrian looked thoughtfully at his mother. "You believe I misunderstood what happened?" Eleanor gently folded the book resting in her lap before answering. "I believe you have not yet seen the entire picture." She offered nothing more. Adrian respected his mother's wisdom enough to recognize when she was inviting him to discover the truth for himself rather than accepting someone else's explanation. That night he remained alone in his study long after the household had grown quiet. The memory of Olivia shielding his mother returned once again, but this time another image stood beside it. He remembered her first question after the confusion had ended. She had not asked whether she would lose her position. She had not worried about the broken porcelain. She had simply asked whether his mother was all right. For the first time, Adrian began wondering whether the person everyone continued calling the Clumsy Maid might actually be the bravest individual living beneath his own roof. And somewhere within the silence of that realization, the first fragile cracks appeared in everything he thought he already knew. The following morning, Adrian arrived in the estate security office long before the rest of the administrative staff began their work. The room was quiet except for the gentle hum of computer monitors displaying dozens of camera views from every hallway, entrance, and reception room throughout the mansion. Normally, he rarely reviewed security footage unless an important delivery or unexpected visitor required confirmation. But this time something far more personal demanded an answer. His mother's words continued echoing in his mind. "You have not yet seen the entire picture." Adrian asked the security supervisor to retrieve the recordings from the family reception, beginning 15 minutes before the sound of the broken porcelain interrupted the evening. Without asking unnecessary questions, the supervisor quietly located the files and stepped outside, leaving Adrian alone with the screen. The elegant ballroom appeared exactly as he remembered it. Guests smiled politely while musicians performed in the background. Servers moved between conversations with practiced grace. Olivia carried a polished silver tray across the marble floor, greeting guests with the same quiet professionalism she displayed every day. Adrian watched carefully, forcing himself to ignore what he thought he already knew. Then the conversation near his mother became noticeably tense. A distant relative leaned closer while speaking with visible frustration. Eleanor remained composed, answering calmly without raising her voice. Several nearby guests exchanged uncertain glances before politely stepping away from the uncomfortable discussion. Olivia noticed the growing tension from across the room. Instead of continuing directly toward another table, she slowed her pace while carefully watching Eleanor. Adrian leaned forward in his chair. The next few seconds unfolded with painful clarity. The relative suddenly made an impulsive movement toward Eleanor. Before anyone else reacted, Olivia abandoned every concern for herself and rushed between them. She raised one arm only to shield Eleanor while the heavy serving tray slipped from her other hand. Porcelain crashed across the floor exactly as Adrian remembered. But the recording revealed something entirely different from the story everyone had repeated afterward. Olivia had not created the danger. She had prevented something far worse. Adrian replayed the recording several times, hoping he had somehow misunderstood what he was seeing. Each viewing confirmed the same truth. Olivia had never been careless. She had acted entirely on instinct to protect his mother without considering the personal consequences. After the porcelain shattered, the recording showed something Adrian had completely overlooked that evening. While confused guests focused on the broken dishes, Olivia immediately turned toward Eleanor, gently asking whether she was all right before anyone else reached her. She never pointed toward the relative whose reckless behavior had caused the entire situation. She simply accepted every misunderstanding in complete silence. Adrian slowly leaned back in his chair, unable to look away from the frozen image on the monitor. His chest felt unexpectedly heavy. He realized that while everyone else had judged Olivia within seconds, she had quietly carried that unfair judgment for days without once asking to defend herself. Later that afternoon, Adrian privately spoke with two employees who had been serving nearby during the reception. Without discussing the security footage, he simply asked each of them to describe what they remembered. Their accounts matched the recording almost perfectly. Both admitted they had hesitated to speak because the evening had already become so uncomfortable, and neither wished to embarrass Eleanor or deepen the family conflict. Piece by piece, the misunderstanding disappeared, replaced by undeniable truth. As evening settled across the estate, Adrian stood alone beside the grand ballroom where everything had begun. The polished marble reflected warm chandelier light exactly as it had on the night of the reception, yet the room felt entirely different now. He no longer saw scattered porcelain or an embarrassed employee. He saw extraordinary courage hidden inside an ordinary uniform. And for the first time since becoming master of the estate, Adrian understood that the greatest failure had never been Olivia dropping a serving tray. It had been his own willingness to believe appearances before searching for the truth. Although the truth now rested unmistakably before Adrian, he found himself asking one question that the security footage could never answer. What kind of life had shaped someone into the person who would instinctively protect another without pausing to think about the consequences? That afternoon, he quietly asked Samuel to bring him Olivia's employment records, not because he wished to investigate her, but because he realized he knew almost nothing about the woman who had worked faithfully inside his own home for nearly a year. The file contained excellent performance reviews, perfect attendance, and repeated comments describing her as dependable, compassionate, and remarkably patient. Yet one detail immediately caught Adrian's attention. Before joining the Romano estate, Olivia had spent nearly 6 years working as a full-time caregiver rather than a traditional housekeeper. Curious, Adrian asked Samuel whether he knew anything more about her past. Samuel nodded thoughtfully. Only what she once shared with Mrs. Grant. She spent many years caring for her grandmother after she developed severe memory problems. Most of her 20s were devoted to making certain her grandmother never felt alone. Adrian listened quietly as Samuel continued. Several people encouraged Olivia to pursue better-paying careers, but she refused because she believed her grandmother needed familiar faces more than expensive treatment. After her grandmother passed away, she said caring for elderly people had become part of who she was. That is one reason she accepted this position when she learned your mother often preferred company over large social gatherings. Those words settled deeply within Adrian's heart. Suddenly, every moment from the reception made perfect sense. Olivia had not calculated the risk before stepping forward. Years of protecting someone vulnerable had shaped her instincts until compassion became faster than fear. Later that afternoon, Adrian walked through the estate gardens searching for a moment of quiet reflection. Autumn leaves drifted gently across the stone pathways, while gardeners carefully prepared flower beds for the approaching winter. Near the greenhouse, he noticed Olivia, kneeling beside one of the older gardeners whose aching hands struggled to repot several delicate white lilies. Without hesitation, she took over the heavier work while encouraging him to rest on a nearby bench. She never behaved as though she were doing anything unusual. She simply smiled, listened to his stories about growing roses with his late wife, and carefully arranged each flower with the same patience she brought to every task. Adrian remained unnoticed behind a row of evergreen hedges, watching another ordinary act of extraordinary kindness unfold before him. Nothing in Olivia's behavior had changed after the misunderstanding. She had not become bitter. She had not searched for sympathy. She had not withdrawn from the people who had judged her unfairly. Instead, she continued offering quiet compassion exactly as she always had. That evening, Eleanor found Adrian standing alone beside the library fireplace. She immediately recognized the thoughtful expression on her son's face. "You learned the truth," she said softly. Adrian nodded. "I did. But I also learned something much greater." Eleanor waited patiently. "I spent days wondering why she acted without thinking," Adrian admitted. "Now I understand she did think. She simply spent so many years protecting someone she loved that helping others became her first instinct." Eleanor smiled gently. "Character is built long before life asks us to reveal it." Adrian looked toward the window where the last light of sunset reflected across the quiet gardens. For the first time, he saw Olivia's courage not as a single remarkable moment, but as the natural result of countless unseen choices made over many years. The woman everyone dismissed as the clumsy maid had been carrying a heart trained by sacrifice, patience, and unconditional care long before she ever walked through the doors of the Romano estate. And Adrian quietly realized that while many people spend their lives searching for heroes, one had been serving breakfast in his own home every single morning without expecting anyone to notice. The realization that Olivia had been misunderstood did not leave Adrian with anger alone. It left him with responsibility. For several days, he said nothing about the security recording, choosing instead to observe the estate with new eyes. The people who worked inside his home had always performed their duties with professionalism, yet he began noticing how often simple kindness went unseen while small mistakes attracted immediate attention. He quietly wondered how many other stories had been judged before they were fully understood. Early one morning, Adrian invited Samuel and Mrs. Eleanor Grant to his private office. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating shelves filled with books and family photographs rather than business contracts for a change. "I want to make several improvements," Adrian said calmly. "Not because the staff has failed, but because I have." The two longtime employees exchanged surprised glances while Adrian continued. He approved additional training for new supervisors that emphasized respect, communication, and careful fact-finding before blame was assigned. He authorized renovations to the employee lounge, replacing worn furniture with comfortable seating, adding larger windows for natural light, fresh plants, and a small library where staff could relax during breaks. He also created a confidential process allowing every employee to report concerns without fear of embarrassment or retaliation. None of the announcements mentioned Olivia by name, yet every decision had grown from what she had silently endured. Meanwhile, Olivia continued her ordinary routine without any awareness that the atmosphere around her was beginning to change. She still arrived before sunrise, greeted the kitchen staff with a warm smile, arranged fresh flowers throughout the mansion, and patiently helped new employees learn unfamiliar routines. Even those who had quietly repeated the unfair rumors noticed that she never treated anyone differently. One afternoon, a young housekeeper accidentally dropped a basket of neatly folded linens across the hallway. Before the embarrassed employee could apologize, Olivia immediately knelt beside her, helping gather every towel while saying gently, "Anyone who works hard will eventually make a mistake. What matters is helping each other stand back up." Adrian happened to witness the moment while walking toward the library. He remained unnoticed around the corner, watching the young employee's anxious expression relax into grateful relief. Olivia never mentioned the rumors that had once surrounded her. She simply offered the same compassion she wished others had shown her. Later that evening, Adrian joined his mother for tea in the conservatory. The greenhouse glowed beneath soft golden light, while autumn leaves drifted peacefully outside the glass walls. Eleanor smiled as she noticed a quiet change in her son's expression. "You are carrying yourself differently," she observed. Adrian nodded thoughtfully. "I spent years believing leadership meant making the right decisions quickly." Olivia taught me that true leadership sometimes begins by slowing down long enough to understand people. Eleanor gently stirred her tea before replying. Power earns obedience. Character earns trust. Adrian looked toward the flower beds where Olivia could be seen helping the elderly gardener cover delicate plants before the evening temperature dropped. She never asked anyone to defend her, Adrian said quietly. She simply continued living according to her values. Eleanor smiled warmly. That is because she was protecting something greater than her own reputation. She was protecting her peace. As twilight settled over the estate, Adrian stood alone beside the ballroom where the misunderstanding had first begun. The polished marble floors reflected the warm glow of crystal chandeliers exactly as they had that unforgettable evening, but the room no longer reminded him of broken porcelain. Instead, it reminded him that restoring dignity required more than discovering the truth. It required changing the environment that allowed unfair judgment to grow in the first place. And with that quiet promise to himself, Adrian began preparing not only to correct one injustice, but to ensure that every person serving beneath his roof would one day know that their dignity mattered just as much as their work. 3 days later, Adrian asked every department supervisor and household employee whose shifts allowed them to attend to gather in the estate conference hall before the afternoon work resumed. The room was elegant but simple, with long walnut tables, tall windows overlooking the gardens, and warm natural light replacing the formal atmosphere usually reserved for business meetings. Quiet curiosity spread throughout the room as gardeners, housekeepers, chefs, drivers, maintenance workers, and administrative staff took their seats. Olivia entered near the end of the group carrying a small notebook, assuming the meeting concerned the recently announced workplace improvements. She quietly chose a chair near the back, hoping to remain unnoticed as she always did. Adrian entered a few moments later accompanied only by Samuel and Mrs. Eleanor Grant. There were no attorneys, no business advisors, and no family members. He stood at the front of the room without notes, allowing the silence to settle before speaking. Today is not about policies, he began calmly. It is about truth. Every conversation immediately stopped. Adrian looked around the room before continuing. Several days ago, many of us accepted a version of events without taking the time to understand what had actually happened. Olivia lowered her eyes, already realizing which evening he meant. Adrian continued with steady honesty. I reviewed the security recording from the family reception. I also spoke with employees who witnessed everything from beginning to end. The facts are now completely clear. The room became so quiet that even the soft ticking of the antique wall clock could be heard. Adrian did not raise his voice. He simply allowed each sentence to carry its own weight. Olivia did not cause that incident. She stepped forward to protect my mother during a moment of unexpected tension. The broken porcelain everyone remembers was the result of her choosing another person's safety over her own comfort. She accepted misunderstanding without defending herself because she refused to create greater embarrassment for my family. Several employees slowly turned toward Olivia with expressions of surprise and regret. The whispers that had once followed her through the corridors suddenly felt painfully unfair. Adrian paused before speaking again. The security recording did not reveal carelessness. It revealed courage. Across the room, the relative whose actions had started the misunderstanding quietly lowered his head. Adrian addressed the matter with calm dignity rather than anger. Every family experiences difficult moments. However, allowing someone else to carry blame for our own actions is never acceptable. Respect is measured not by status, but by personal responsibility. No further accusation was necessary. The lesson had already been understood by everyone present. Adrian then looked toward the department supervisors seated along the front table. From this day forward, no employee inside this estate will be judged by rumors or assumptions. We will seek facts before conclusions, and every person will be treated with the dignity they deserve. Samuel nodded in quiet agreement, while Mrs. Eleanor Grant smiled with visible relief. Olivia remained seated, clearly overwhelmed by the attention she had never wanted. When Adrian invited her to stand, she did so hesitantly. You protected someone who could not protect herself in that moment, Adrian said sincerely. You expected nothing in return. For that, you have my deepest respect. Olivia answered with characteristic humility. I only did what I hoped someone would do for my own grandmother." Her gentle words filled the room with another thoughtful silence. Several employees quietly wiped tears from their eyes. Others lowered their heads, remembering every careless rumor they had repeated. As the meeting concluded, no applause erupted. None was necessary. The stillness inside the room carried something far more powerful than noise. It carried understanding. For the first time since arriving at the Romano estate, Olivia no longer stood beneath the weight of an unfair reputation. She stood surrounded by the quiet respect that truth had finally restored, and everyone present understood that the strongest form of justice had not arrived through anger or humiliation, but through honesty spoken with dignity. The atmosphere inside the Romano estate changed almost immediately after the meeting, though not because anyone had been forced to change. The truth had quietly accomplished what rules alone never could. Employees who had once repeated careless rumors now greeted Olivia with genuine warmth. Conversations paused whenever she entered, not from embarrassment, but from a new awareness of how easily appearances could deceive. Olivia accepted every smile with the same humility she had always shown. She never reminded anyone that they had doubted her. She never expected apologies. She simply continued living exactly as she had before, allowing kindness rather than resentment to shape every interaction. Several days later, Eleanor invited Adrian to join her for afternoon tea in the sunroom overlooking the southern gardens. Winter sunlight filtered gently through the glass walls, filling the room with soft golden light, while white camellias bloomed despite the cold outside. Olivia entered carrying a silver tea service and carefully arranged fresh pastries beside delicate porcelain cups before quietly preparing to leave. "Please stay with us for a few minutes," Eleanor said warmly. Olivia looked surprised. "Mrs. Moretti, I still have several rooms waiting to be prepared." Eleanor smiled with gentle affection. "Those rooms can wait. Today I would rather enjoy your company." Olivia hesitated respectfully before taking the chair nearest the window. Adrian noticed that even in such a simple invitation, she seemed more concerned about her responsibilities than about herself. Eleanor poured tea for all three of them before speaking softly. "This house has felt different lately." Adrian smiled. "I believe it finally reflects the values you always hoped it would." Eleanor nodded before turning toward Olivia. "You know, my late husband often said that a family is measured by how it treats the people who serve within its walls." Olivia lowered her eyes modestly. "Everyone here has always been kind to me." Adrian gently shook his head. "Not everyone, and not always." Olivia looked at him with quiet understanding rather than discomfort. "People sometimes judge quickly because life moves quickly," she answered. "Holding on to bitterness only slows our own hearts." Eleanor reached across the table and gently placed her hand over Olivia's. "That is exactly why you belong here." The room fell peacefully silent. No dramatic speeches followed. No emotional display interrupted the quiet afternoon. Yet the simple gesture carried more meaning than words alone ever could. For the first time since joining the estate, Olivia did not feel like someone merely completing daily tasks inside another person's home. She felt accepted. That evening, the household gathered for a small family dinner celebrating Eleanor's birthday. Unlike previous formal receptions, the occasion was intimate and relaxed. Just before everyone took their seats, Eleanor surprised the room by asking one additional place setting to be prepared beside her own chair. Several relatives looked at one another with quiet curiosity. Eleanor smiled warmly as Olivia approached, believing she had been called to refill water glasses. Instead, Eleanor gently touched the empty chair. "Would you honor me by joining us for dinner?" Olivia stood completely still, unsure she had heard correctly. "Mrs. Moretti, I could not possibly." Eleanor's smile only grew warmer. "You protected me without asking who was watching. Today I am simply inviting someone I deeply respect to share a meal." Adrian nodded in agreement, leaving no room for doubt. Olivia slowly accepted the invitation, not because she sought recognition, but because refusing Eleanor's sincere kindness would have diminished the gift she was offering. As conversation filled the dining room that evening, something invisible quietly disappeared from the Romano estate forever. No one saw Olivia as the clumsy maid anymore. They saw the woman whose quiet courage had reminded an entire household that dignity could never be measured by a job title. And from that evening forward, she was no longer remembered for the sound of breaking porcelain, but for the silent strength that had protected another human being when it mattered most. Winter gradually gave way to the first gentle signs of spring, and with the changing season the Romano estate seemed to breathe differently. Morning sunlight lingered longer across the marble floors, fresh blossoms returned to the gardens, and laughter that had once been rare now drifted naturally through the halls where quiet tension had once settled after the family reception. The changes were subtle, yet everyone who lived and worked beneath the estate's roof could feel them. Respect no longer depended upon titles. It had become part of the home's daily rhythm. Olivia continued arriving before sunrise each morning, wearing the same modest housekeeping uniform she had always worn. She still carried fresh flowers through the corridors, greeted every employee by name, and paused whenever someone needed a helping hand. Nothing about her routine suggested she considered herself different after everything that had happened. She never expected special treatment, and she never allowed gratitude from others to change the humility that had guided her from the beginning. One peaceful morning, Adrian walked through the gardens before his first business meeting of the day. Dew rested upon blooming roses while birds welcomed the quiet sunrise from the branches of old oak trees. Near the greenhouse, he found Olivia patiently helping a newly hired groundskeeper learn how to care for delicate white lilies without damaging their roots. She explained each step with gentle patience, encouraging him after every small success exactly as she had once encouraged nervous housekeepers and elderly gardeners. Adrian remained unnoticed for several moments, quietly reflecting on how easily genuine leadership appeared in someone who never sought authority. Later that afternoon, the estate welcomed several guests interested in supporting a local program providing companionship for senior citizens living alone. Rather than introducing expensive renovations or impressive financial achievements, Adrian chose to show them something far more meaningful. He invited them to tour the employee spaces where kindness had quietly transformed everyday life. They saw coworkers sharing lunch together, supervisors listening respectfully before making decisions, and experienced employees patiently guiding newcomers instead of criticizing their mistakes. One visitor remarked that the atmosphere felt unusually peaceful for such a large household. Adrian smiled thoughtfully before answering. Buildings do not create this kind of environment. People do. Across the courtyard, Olivia helped Eleanor arrange fresh flowers beside the garden fountain. The older woman gently squeezed Olivia's hand before stepping back to admire the arrangement. Neither woman noticed Adrian watching from a distance. They simply enjoyed one another's company as though they had known each other for a lifetime. In that quiet moment, Adrian realized the greatest victory had never been correcting the misunderstanding surrounding the broken porcelain. The true victory had been restoring trust before bitterness could take root. As evening settled over the estate, every employee gathered outdoors for a simple spring supper beneath strings of warm lights stretching across the garden terrace. There were no assigned seats, no separation between management and staff, and no formal speeches. Conversations flowed easily while children of several employees laughed across the lawn chasing one another between blooming flower beds. Olivia sat beside Eleanor while sharing homemade bread with the kitchen staff, smiling exactly as she had long before anyone recognized her courage. Adrian looked around the gathering and understood that one ordinary act of selfless protection had quietly changed an entire community. He had once believed strength meant controlling every situation before problems appeared. Olivia had taught him that true strength often revealed itself in the quiet decision to protect another person without expecting recognition in return. The shattered porcelain from that unforgettable evening had long since disappeared, yet the lesson it left behind remained stronger than stone. From that day forward, no one inside the Romano estate ever called Olivia the Clumsy maid again. They remembered her instead as the woman whose quiet courage reminded an entire household that dignity is never determined by status, kindness is never a sign of weakness, and the greatest acts of heroism often happen when someone chooses another person's safety before their own reputation. And on that day, everyone beneath the Romano roof remembered exactly what true dignity looked like.